everyone. We are thrilled to be bringing you this beekeeping webinar today on our Welcoming Wednesday webinar. Welcome to Minnesota Women in Conservation. We are an initiative of Renewing the Countryside, which is an organization that's been serving Minnesota and the upper Midwest for over 20 years with supporting and connecting stewards to the land and to farms with the necessary resources. We really appreciate the support of the Natural Resource Conservation Services for the funding of this initiative. In particular, we want to thank the Minnesota branch. Renewing the Countryside has a breadth and depth of programs that we have been investing in for over 22 years. And you can see it ranges from urban ag to Go Farm Connect to early child care and conservation connections. Why does conservation and women in conservation matter? Well, because women are producers of over 9 million acres of farmland. Female farmers listing their primary occupation has increased in 2022 to 35,623 women in farming and 19,000 as non-operating landowners. We female farmers are involved in every type of farming, from grain and oilseed production to meat and protein to sheep and goats. And vegetables and fruits, of course, and flowers and pigment producers. Our goal and objectives with Minnesota Women in Conservation is to welcome all women in agriculture and land stewardship, to increase women's knowledge, understanding, and use of conservation and access to NRCS programs and planning. We are here to shepherd women through that process, and ultimately, we hope that this initiative will build a lasting legacy of relationships and regional networks. Our team consists of approximately 10 women from Renewing the Countryside in Minnesota and in Wisconsin. And we have a regional coordinator list coming up, but also the website will tell you what region you're in and where the local coordinator is. So Allison Ryan is with the North Central Northeast region, Aiken, Itasca, and related counties. You can see tremendous amount of acreage and female production and farming going on there. It's true in every single region where our coordinators live. So Alex is Lackaparle, Chippewa, and Swift counties in the upper Minnesota Valley region. Noreen is representing Clay, Norman, and Wilkin counties. However, she also spreads her wings statewide. And Maddie Barch, who is in the Southeast region with Goodhue, Rice, and Dakota County, where you will see we have the highest concentration of female farmers and a high amount of acreage, which we attribute to being south of the metro, proximity to a huge marketplace. So our goal is to equip women to implement conservation practices. And we do that through potlucks, webinars, field days, and learning circles. I am happy to share that almost 60% of the participants have land relationships, like landowner. 27% are conservation and ag support members. Almost 20% are beginning farmers, and 5% renting land to farm. This map has been put together by our data manager, Kara Komodo, and we're hoping that you'll help us turn the state dark green, because this reflects the outreach and engagement that we've been making in the first year. As of the end of September, over 1,000 contacts have been made, 224 of which are historically underserved and identify as such. 423 have attended events. And 793 are accounted for usage of our online webinars, either in person or seeing the recordings. 400 in total, beginning farmers, land renters, and owners. We are looking forward to hosting another round of December learning circles, and this is an example of one that was hosted by Allison in North Central region last December. Our evaluations from in-person events have given us tremendous feedback, lots of good information. We have so much potential when we're together. It's wonderful, a wonderful group of women sharing goals, so many more resources than I realized. And here's a picture of our team. We attended Farm Fest because our colleague and trusted team member, Noreen Thomas, was one of the finalists for Women Farmer of the Year. So we would like you to continue to join us there for these Wednesday webinars. We have a little change in November. Maddie and Allison will be hosting an evening webinar shaped like a learning circle about our watershed, our community. And we'll have a date relatively soon. We're going to take December off for the holidays, and we'll be back with you January 28th for the fourth Wednesday of the month. Thank you so much for your time. And now I'm handing this over to Noreen or Alex.
To Noreen, and welcome everyone. This is a session on beekeeping, and I'm going to introduce you to two ladies who are awesome. They run the FM Beekeeping Association here in Fargo-Moorhead, and it's Kelly Parker and Lisa Burns. And take it away. Let's top it off with Kelly. Introduce yourself and tell us how you got started. And then we'll go to Lisa and just roll.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Parker. I am a 4-H Youth Development Specialist at North Dakota State, but that isn't how I'm connected to beekeeping. I actually got connected to beekeeping when I was living in Ohio and I was working for the SNAP Ed program. And somebody in my office told me that I really ought to get bees. She knew I had a small acreage outside of town where I had a large garden. She said, if you get into beekeeping, you can help save the bees, but you'll also increase the yields in your garden. And so I jumped in and started trying that out and found it was actually rather peaceful and relaxing. Definitely had some challenges along the way. I didn't realize that Russian girls are quote unquote hot when you talk about Russian bees, which means they will follow you when you are trying to inspect your hive and do things like that. And as a new beekeeper, that was pretty scary. But we did figure out kind of how to cool those things down a little bit. And so now I work primarily with Italian bees.
And you're beginning then, how many years ago was that, Kelly?
That was back in 2017 that I bought my first hive.
Oh, wonderful. Lisa, do you want to kick it off? Introduce yourself and how long
sure.
How you got started?
Yep. My name is Lisa Burns, and I'm excuse me. I'm currently retired from the post office. Worked there for 25 years. So now I have a lot of free time to take care of bees. So I began beekeeping around 2012, and what made me consider beekeeping was we had recently moved out to Downer, Minnesota, and we had like 12 acres, and I figured with all that acreage, we should raise some bees. My uncle was a beekeeper at the time, and so I thought, well, if I go and I take a look at the bees and I'm not afraid, then I should, just start the beekeeping journey. So we went over to where my uncle had his bees, and it was around March, the end of March, that we went there, and he opened them up, and they were just calm, and I wasn't terrified or anything. So I thought, this seems like a really interesting hobby, and it has been extremely interesting, and there is so much to learn about bees. I'm still overwhelmed with, all the different changes and things that you have to know about beekeeping. So, and then shortly after that, we took a class from the UMM, Minneapolis, from Marla Spivak, and we learned even more, taking that. So we just got more and more involved, and then I found out about a beekeeping group in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and so I joined that, and I've been a member since. And I was a president for like 6 years, and Kelly was kind enough to be president after me, and so that's just kind of been my journey as far as beekeeping.
We'll kick this to Kelly. Kelly, how much money do you think it is to start up And I know in our practice session that Lisa had said maybe get 2 hives. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Exactly. So the cost depends on where you get your supplies, what kind of bees you're getting, and all of those things. So the minimum to start with a single hive is something like $200 with the bare bones, and you don't really have enough to make it through an entire year, and that doesn't include the bees. So if you're looking at actually getting 2 complete hive setups and 2 packages and the bee suits and all of those things, you're looking at more like $1,300 to $1,500 more than likely. And those, that's a package of bees, 2 packages of bees, I should say, which are both close to what, $150 a piece now, Lisa, is about what they're running. And then probably 4 deeps, 2 to 3 mediums per hive. So that'd be 6 mediums, let's say, as well as your bottom board, your telescoping cover, your undercover, all of those kinds of things. And your hive tools, which you probably want to get multiples of those because you will lay them down and forget them somewhere, and then your spouse might run over them with a lawnmower.
Hey, and Lisa, you had some slides for us to look at equipment. Alex, is it possible to cue that up for her?
Lisa, did you want to share your screen or?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
either
because
way.
I sent that to you, so I thought you
Okay.
were going to do that.
Yeah, no problem. Let me get these up and open Google Slides and share my screen here. Sorry, everybody, just uno momento. Oh, there it is. Share. And here's this. And can everybody let me know
There.
if you can? Okay. And I will view slideshow. Okay. And just let me know when you need to click forward.
Okay. I guess I put together this slideshow, and a lot of this comes from the training that Kelly and I do for first-time beekeepers. But I thought, since you guys are just trying to learn a little bit about beekeeping, you can move it to the next slide. That there's some things to consider when you are thinking about, becoming a beekeeper and that. So there's basically 4 things that are like important to think about before you become a beekeeper. So basically one of the most important things you need to consider is like managing your hive. The next thing to consider is the equipment, what you're going to, what you're going to purchase, then your apiary site, and then your source for bees. And you can move to the next one. And I put this slide in, okay. Do we want to talk about this real quick or?
Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Sure. Okay. So the thing about honeybees is they basically have like 3 different types of bees in there. There's the queen, the worker, and the drone. And so when you're managing your hive, you have to manage it based on keeping the queen alive, managing your workers, keeping them healthy, and then also managing the drone population also. And we'll talk more later, but I just kind of wanted to say that, that's a big part of it is knowing what each type of bee is in there and what their roles are, within the hive. So you can move to the next one. And I guess I was a little bit more conservative than Kelly. But Kelly's numbers are just as accurate as mine was. It just depends on like if you want to get the more expensive jacket, or if you just want a veil, or if you want to purchase a nook or a package. Nooks cost more than packages do, but they have their own purposes. And as far as like the beehive, with the entrance reducer, I had priced out what 2 brood boxes and 2 honey supers are. But if you purchase another brood box and a couple more honey supers, then of course that cost is going to increase. So in general, it's going to cost, like Kelly was saying, $1,300 to $1,500 depending on like how your bees do and if you want to get the nice jackets or not. So, and then of course you need like the gloves, a smoker, hive tools, hive feeder, pollen patties, and a mouse guard, of course, for each one of yours. Okay, and you can move to the next one. So when we talk about bee packages and nooks, this is what we're talking about. So on the left-hand side is a bee package, and basically they are not in a hive or anything like that. You're going to install them into your hive that you purchase. And we usually recommend that for new beekeepers because then it will slowly build up and you won't be overwhelmed. The nook is kind of like a mini hive, and you will install this into a larger hive, but it has kind of a head start. The queen is already laying her eggs. And of course, because it's more of a head start, that's going to be more expensive, so it depends on who you purchase from. It's, generally around $250, something like that. Depends on who you get that from. Okay. And another thing you need to consider is your apiary site. If it's a safe location, convenient access, good foraging, good air circulation, water drainage, source of fresh water, distance from neighboring apiary. So those are all the things you need to consider when selecting your site. And the last one. Or maybe that was the last one.
I'm not getting another click there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That must have been the last one. So I just kind of
Wonderful.
wanted to go over those quickly, but those are the main things that you need to think about when you create an apiary.
Could Lisa and Kelly, could you share too your mistakes? And we talked about also things like mice and I was a little horrified, skunks. Could you share that with us?
So mice think that your hive is a wonderful place to spend the winter, and they will hop up in there, climb inside, and they will literally go to town eating your comb and your honey that is in there with your bees. And your bees don't really seem to care until the population gets so small that, or they run out of resources that it essentially kills them off. That's actually how we ended up getting rid of my Russians that overwintered, as the mice got in there with them. But skunks I jokingly say the skunks think your bees are jalapeno poppers, and they'll sit on their hind legs at the entrance to your hive and just sit there and eat the bees as they come out to guard the colony. And so that is something else that's there. We also got a great question about deterrents for bears. And really the only thing that's effective for bears is an electric fence. If you don't have electricity out of the site, I had a site like that at my property. Car batteries are your backup for that. And there are solar powered electric energizers that you can use. It doesn't take a ton of energy necessarily to scare them away, but once a bear has found a site, it's really hard to keep them away from it. So we had a couple of hives that the bear came along, and basically it looked like a person had disassembled the entire hive and taken everything apart. The only way we actually knew it was a bear was that one of the boxes that they had knocked over had claw marks on it. Other than that, ratchet strapping everything together really tightly is a good bet, but they can still be knocked over then. And then there are some hive designs like the Apiary hives that actually latch shut, and they do have a guarantee against bear attacks.
Okay. And Lisa, what from your beginning experiences, and maybe talk about pollinators, or what should I plant as well for the bees?
I guess you had kind of asked about like one of our experiences, like first becoming a beekeeper, and I guess we were like, I guess I'd say I started out kind of cocky in that, and I didn't know enough not to be quite as cocky. So one of the things that we did is like we harvested too much honey our first year, and we took a lot and didn't realize that the bees needed more. So you need to make sure that when you're overwintering, that you're properly preparing the equipment and that you're leaving them enough feed. And there's not a problem with taking as much honey as we did, but we didn't feed them to replace that. So then, then spring comes and then our hives did not survive. So that was a big part of it is just again, back to managing and that. So, okay, so there's a question here that talks about the various species of honeybees. There's quite a few different species. Italians are the most common. So when you purchase a package, most of them are going to be Italians. And it's because they're pretty good honey producers and they're also pretty calm and mellow. So they're just a really, really good starter bee. Russians, and Kelly can tell you all about Russians, that they're a little bit more aggressive, but I think they're better honey producers. I think that's kind of why you look
They're
like
better
them.
at overwintering. They're very, very, they draw their numbers way down in the winter to protect the honey, and then they're very conservative in how much honey they use. So that makes them a little easier to manage that way and actually getting them through a winter. But they are more defensive, but they are also a little bit more resistant to varroa mite, which is the #1 parasite that we deal with in honeybees in the US.
Is there anything you can do for that, for the parasites that come towards the bees?
Yes, so there's lots of different treatment and management methods. That could be an entire class by itself. We spent the better part of one of the years that in the club talking about different management methods, and there are podcasts that have spent tons of time going through that. So there are chemical methods, there's organic methods, there are also then management practices, but you have to be, with all of the management practices, you've got to really be on the ball, or you actually end up just growing mites instead of defending your hive against them. So everything from using organic acids like formic acid or oxalic acid, those are the two big ones that are both organic chemical control methods. Then there's also things like HopGuard and things like that that are sometimes used. And then there's the actual synthetic chemical methods, which are not as commonly used for the most part right now, I don't think. Right, Lisa?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and like there's some older treatment methods, and part of that why they don't recommend it now is because the mites have become more resistant to like some of those treatments and that. So I think oxalic acid is probably the best treatment right now. And there's different ways that you can administer that. There's like that. I'm sorry, Kelly, maybe you're probably better describing the different methods for, there's like the drip method and then I forgot what it's called.
Vaporization.
Vaporization, yeah.
There's also now an EPA approved extended release method, which comes in strips that have been essentially soaked in it that you put in the hive like you would with formic. But again, you have to follow the directions as you would with any pesticide, just because the dose makes the poison. So yeah, something to be very, very careful about when you're going through there. So the drip method, you have a set volume of a concentration that you dribble between the seams of your frames. And there's limits on how much you can do of that per brood box. And then for the vaporization, you're actually taking the crystallized form of oxalic acid and you're putting it inside the hive, covering up all the entrances, and you're hooking your vaporizer up to a battery that's usually tied to an engine that's running. And that causes those crystals to be superheated and to turn into gas. And that gas then rises up, goes throughout the hive and gets on the bees. And that causes the mites to fall off because it's toxic to the mites.
Kelly, when we were talking about what to plant, like pollinators with our practice session, we also talked about the conservation, how that helps with some of the plants. Could you talk about that?
Absolutely. So anything that you're planting that's supporting of native pollinators, so all of your native plant species, for in large part anyway, that are flowering, you're going to have a benefit to honeybees as well as to those native pollinators. So that's something to keep in mind as you're going through. So if you can get native seed, whether through an organization like Blue Thumb or through your soil conservation district or through a group like Pheasants Forever, or Ducks Unlimited. There's so many different ones that have these promotional programs where you can get free native seed species or plant plugs. And you can put those out in set areas. That will help to feed the bees and the native pollinators. It also provides them with habitat. And then something that it also does for you in terms of your land use, when we have crazy rainfalls and things like that, all of that rain that comes down, those plant roots and species kind of act like a sponge, and they suck that water up so that you have less issues with runoff into our streams and our roadways and things of that nature.
There's also, can you talk about some of the plants we buy sometimes have nicotinoids on the seed covering? Even sunflower seeds that we plant on a farm can have that, which can be so harmful. Could you talk about that a little bit?
I can. So I'll readily say I'm out over my skis on that. That is not my area of expertise. But I do know that there's some evidence that the coating does end up getting taken up to some extent by the plants. Even though we don't intend it to be toxic to the bees, that can actually be a sublethal dose to that hive. And over time, as they're bringing more and more of that back to their hive, they could actually be doing more harm than it is good and promoting them. So using seed that hasn't been treated with that on any sort of species that's going to be working, or any kind of crop that's going to be feeding a bee, is the better option if you can.
Okay. And what about, wintering them? Minnesota is really tough on bees in winter. It's tough on us as people.
Lisa, I think you've had the most success with this.
The honeybees, they are not native to our area. They're from a more moderate climate in that. So we're trying to force them to live in a climate that they're not naturally acclimated to. So we have to, prepare them properly, for the winter, make sure that there's enough resources in the hive. They should have like about 100 pounds of honey in the hive in order for it to like last through the spring. And then you also have to wrap it up. We usually put tar paper. Some people put different insulation and stuff like that around. So there's like a whole bunch of different types of methods of, preparing it so that it can get through the winter. And it's like crucial that there's ventilation. And I know it seems counterintuitive, to put like a hole, put like a hole, in the boxes, but that helps keep the excess moisture out. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of different ways that people do it. You can Google, YouTube, and they have like a whole bunch of different, different methods in that. And even within our group, there's so many people that do different ways. And how I raise my bees is different how Kelly raises her bees. Even though we're both in Minnesota, where our bees are depends a lot in how we're going to manage them, even though it's like we're not that far away, but it's far enough away that it's like another world for the bees. So
there's also
go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, I was just going to add to that. So there's a joke among beekeepers that if you ask a room of 5 beekeepers a question, you'll get 10 answers. And that's because there's so many different ways that you can manage a hive, and a lot of that is location dependent.
Right. What about natural bees that have been here forever? And then we're introducing European bees. Is there competition? What can you share your spin on that, please?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of debate about this in the field. And what I like to point out to people is if you have enough forage for your native species, you're going to have enough to support the honeybees too, and vice versa. The thing to keep in mind with honeybees is they are going to be focusing on one particular crop for basically an extended period of time. So that's why things like letting the dandelions bloom in the spring is so important, because that's their first food source. And when those dandelions start popping, they're everywhere. So even though it's not a nutritionally complete source of food for the bees, they're still going to be going and gathering the pollen and nectar from those dandelions and bringing it back to the hive because there's so much of it. But then when we start looking at later on in the spring and the summer, when there are more things available, they're going to be working on the source of whatever has the largest amount of food available that is close to their hive. They're working model, which is very important.
I think Kelly's freezing a bit. There. Can you also share, we talked about location, and one of the things is that just even in production, we had buckwheat, and I know you guys have heard this story, but you could actually see where the bees were because they didn't have to travel far because the buckwheat was blooming, and it was something kind of midsummer to fall. And the production right around where they were was significant, almost twice as much as the buckwheat that was on the other perimeter. So it took us a while to figure out for location, oh yeah, we should put them in the middle of the field. And that worked out really great. So if you can talk a little bit more about selection of location, because we do want that water close by. Otherwise, if you have livestock, like Kelly, you have horses, you notice that if you don't have that water source, they're all over your water for your animals. Can you share some more about location?
I'll just add that my bees have little landing boards. I put logs in all of my waters up to the side for my horses so that the bees can come and get a drink and go back, and then they don't drown inside my area. So location matters for more than just that, though. Location also matters because all of the air currents that are flowing around that hive, you don't want that air blowing straight in the bottom entrance. If you think about it, it would kind of be like putting your house with an open window right where the air is coming in. In the middle of winter, that's not going to be real pleasant. And in the summer, when it's, a strong south wind and it's 100 degrees outside, that's not going to be great either. So you want it to be an area where it's going to have some air circulation, but it's not going to be a strong, forceful breeze. And you also want it to be where they're going to get sun in the morning so that it kind of wakes them up, says, okay, it's time to go out and start foraging. But you also don't want it to be, particularly in hotter areas, where it's going to have that hot sun beating down on it in the middle of the summer, where it's going to cause that hive to heat up so much that it's uncomfortable for the bees and that their comb can't stand up to it. So those are things that are important for their survival as well. And then even things like, do you have standing water around your hive? Because that's not going to be great for them either. That brings a lot of humidity into that hive and a lot of issues with potential fungal diseases. I'm also seeing a question about controlling honey flavor. So all of that depends. This comes back to what we talked about earlier about bees working one source of flowers at a time. So you can actually pull honey off after each sort of thing is bloomed. And it's not going to be 100% from that one type of flower, but most of it will be. So you can get things like apple blossom honey or cherry blossom honey or dandelion honey. But most of them are wildflower because we aren't necessarily able to sit and watch all of that. But when you have a commercial beekeeper or even a larger sideliner who's actually bringing bees around for pollination services, they can say with a fair degree of confidence that the main source of nectar that those bees were bringing in were the thing that they were pollinating.
And can you also?
And a good I'm sorry.
No,
a
go
good
ahead, Lisa.
example, like the first year that we had harvested honey, we harvested in July. We didn't know any better, and so we harvested in July. Was like shortly after the clover was finished, and each year I keep like a bottle of the honey that I collect every year, and so from the first year, July of 2012, I have honey that is still liquid because it came from clover honey. And because I started harvesting after that, like the middle of August, then it's like their last crop was basically goldenrod. So then anything after that, it would crystallize. So like like I said, I've got honey from 2012 that's still liquid, but everything else, isn't. So it does make a difference when you harvest as to like what kind of honey you have. And we like the later harvest honey because it's more sweeter and richer. So, but that's in our area. And there was like one time that everybody kind of, I think there was like 3 or 4 of us that brought our honey samples in, and they were all so different. Some were lighter and some were darker. So that was like really interesting. So it depends on where you are too, as to what's going to be harvested and what kind of honey you're going to have.
And I have to ask you this, I don't know if it's a myth with honey that the antioxidants in it you're not supposed to use, is it stainless steel or is it plastic? There was something about, using honey that you were supposed to use a certain, maybe it was plastic. Have you heard that?
So any kind of metal container could potentially change the flavor of the honey just because of the ions that is in that metal. Honey in plastic is more of a concern because of microplastics, just like anything that's in plastic. However, I will say those little squeezable bears are a whole lot easier to get honey out of than a glass bear jar. That's my personal preference for container is a glass jar, but for most people who buy our honey, they want it in a little squeezable plastic container. At least for most folks that I've run into. Lisa, could you chat a bit more about the rules of thumb for winterizing? We have a great question in the chat about that. So when we do the winterizing.
Yeah, we generally, it's probably about mid-October, but again, it's going to depend on like what your weather is, and it's really kind of weather dependent. If you have like 80-degree weather in October, you clearly don't want to, wrap your hives. And Rich and we've actually, I think maybe the latest we've wrapped our hives has been like December. So you don't have to be worried quite. But we also had a lot of protection in that we have like trees and that, so we have more protection for our hives, so we don't have to be quite as worried about the winterization. But if you have if your bees are in an open field, you may want to winterize just a little bit sooner. You may want to think about putting up some barriers. When we first were beekeeping, basically our bees were like out in a field. So then we put up some plywood to like block the excess wind, and that really helped a lot. So again, just kind of depends, but probably end of October through maybe mid-December is typically a good time to winterize your hives. But the thing is, you also need to make sure that you have the weight on your hive. If you don't have the weight on your hive, then you want to feed your bees probably about September. If you're finding that they're just not producing as much, then you're going to feed them sugar water is basically what you're going to be doing. So sugar syrup, but you don't boil the sugar syrup. You just do it enough so it melts, and then you feed it to the bees.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, funding sources, you guys had talked about legumes to lawns, and one of our participants, one of the women, actually got funded because you brought that up. And we know there's NRCS when they're open. They're not right now, but the NRCS, sometimes the soil and water conservation, but other things that you guys know of that would be helpful, North Dakota and Minnesota?
So Lawns to Legumes is sponsored through Blue Thumb. So that's the one that is, you have to put in a set area. Another one is the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. You can get free seed from them for, I think you have to have a minimum of 2 acres. Does that sound right, Lisa? But they'll get you funding for up to 20 acres, the seeds, and they'll specialize the seed mixes for your areas. And again, if you have enough forage for your native pollinators, you'll have enough forage for your honeybees as well. So those are a great place to do it. North Dakota side, the soil and water conservation districts, they usually have a cost sharing grant as well. That's like 75-25 split, where you can get native seeds or plugs. So all of those are great. Also, I'll say the Minnesota forestry is a great place to get native tree species, because it's not just your native plants where you think about grasses and flowers, it's also the trees that bloom. So maple is a huge source of nectar for our bees in the spring, as is basswood later on in the year. So those are all some options.
Those are great. And then have you guys worked with NRCS at all on your land? I know, Kelly, you have some acres, and Lisa too. Can you share that?
So I'm on the Minnesota side, of course, and we are had a grant through the Lawns to Legumes grant as well. So we did the 75-25. So we have that out front. And we've also worked with the Minnesota DNR for the forestry division to get native trees out here at a really reduced cost. But I do have some friends on the North Dakota side working with the soil and water conservation districts, and they have done so much to try and get that information out. And we've also worked with Pheasants Forever as another source for free seed.
And let's talk about your one-day seminars that you have. Let's give a plug for that, please.
Lisa, you've been our lead trainer for years, so tell them all about it.
Okay. I see this one message. I'm going to answer this one question first. So they talk about plastic squeeze bottles that tend to solidify. That is another reason why we don't recommend putting honey into plastic, because if it does, crystallize, then it's like really difficult to get it to be liquid again. We don't microwave it because that will destroy a lot of the good nutrients that are in the honey. But what you can do is you can put in like a little pot of water and just kind of heat it up. But especially if it's in plastic, you really have to kind of watch it, but you just kind of warm it up enough so that it, will partially liquefy, and then just kind of stir it around and stuff like that. So that's kind of the best way to do that, but you really do have to kind of watch that. And okay, so now I'm gonna get back to the classes that we offer. I am actually going to be holding a mead making class November 4th from 6 to 8 at the fairgrounds at the Ag Education Building. So this will be my second mead making class, but I've been making mead for about 6-7 years. And it's just like one of the things that you can do with products of the hive and that. So, but it's a lot of fun. And another one that we offer is in the spring, usually February, March. We usually offer 3 classes for new beekeeper training. And that's typically lasts about 3 hours. And it's based on the education, it's based on the class that the UMM has, that we learned from Marla Spivak. So we had based it on her training materials. So that's when we have it. And that's at the Ag Education Building as well.
And what about your Facebook page?
Oh, yeah. We also have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. The Facebook group is private, and so you have to request to join that. The Facebook group, I always get that mixed up. I believe the Facebook page is just a Red River Valley Beekeepers, or else check. Do you remember, Kelly? Is it FM Red River Valley or just Red River Valley?
For the page, it's FM Red River Valley Beekeepers.
Okay.
I do believe. Yeah.
Yep. And then for the group, that's the FM Red River Valley Beekeepers. And you have to be careful on that one because there's also one in Texas. So,
and in Canada as well.
Oh, Canada also. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So make sure that you are selecting the one for our area. Oh, okay, good. She put that up. So anyway, so you just have a few simple questions to answer in order to join our group. But it's our group is like very active in that. So if you have questions, usually you'll get an answer with, definitely within a day. So.
One of the things too that NDSU, Kelly's home place of employment there, is they did samples on buckwheat honey, and buckwheat honey is just so dark and rich and thick. And actually they found that it's like 8 times the antioxidants as regular honey, and it's used for a lot of healing as well. But I just thought it was real interesting because it's like buckwheat honey is either you like it or you don't. And there's no middle ground, but maybe you can talk a little bit about flavors too, like clover and different flavors that you've tried.
Like clover tends to be a lot lighter. So if you like a lighter flavor, honey, clover is very good for that. And also it does not crystallize like the other honey. And I've said before that I do like the, we harvest after the goldenrod. But then it's like the bees have been collecting this honey throughout the summer. So it's not really actually just goldenrod, it's throughout the summer. But because goldenrod is in there, it will deepen and enrichen and make the honey much sweeter, and I just love it. It's just so people always say how wonderful our honey is. So so that's like some of the flavors that we're aware of. And I know, like, California will have like orange blossom honey, and there's different flavors like that. I'm not as familiar with those. But wildflower honey, I know the honey source up here, our honey tends to be a lot more lighter than it is down south. So whatever difference it is, ours just tends to be a lot more lighter and fruitier.
We got a couple other great questions from Burke. So one was about the amount of honey we harvest per year or per season. And then tied to that, how does the cost and labor equate with the income from honey production? So I was just saying it depends on the year. So
yeah, it really depends.
there is
like
a joke,
our
though,
first
that
year we had like, oh, are you still there, Kelly?
I am, yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, you kind of cut out a little. So it just really kind of depends on the season. Sometimes they're just more productive. If it's like a really dry season, they're going to have more difficulty finding resources, and you're going to have less honey, or it can be vice versa. So it just really kind of depends on the year. It's very weather dependent in that too. Or if it's like a really rainy year, it could be that they can't get out of their hive as often, because the weather is just not cooperative. So and my husband and I, we just keep most of it for ourselves, and we sell a little bit to just kind of help support our hobby in that. So as far as like production goes, we only have like 3, 4, or 5 hives, so it's enough to get us through the year and sell a few extra. But we maybe get, oh, I don't know, maybe 100 pounds of honey, something like that. So, and Kelly, I think you have more hives, so you might have more of a production. Or some people like to just keep it for the bees, just let the bees eat it all up too. So it depends on what you want to do.
I'm trying a different method of overwintering this year with 3 deeps, and I left most of my honey on the hives. I just pulled 2 medium boxes off, and they were robbed out before I could actually get them in and harvest them.
Oh, that's too bad.
Going to ask participants too, while they're listening, last minute or so, to please do the evaluation for us and for Kelly and Lisa while you're still listening in. So if you would click on that in the chat, that would be very helpful. Also, ladies, what are the common mistakes you think? Like you hear a lot on Facebook that people keep asking you like, oh, this happened or that happened. Kind of take us down that path.
Most of the time when I hear mistakes, it's tied to them not testing and treating for varroa mites. And then if they did actually treat, they didn't go back and test again after to make sure that the treatment was effective. So that's probably a big part of that. Otherwise, I think one that we hear pretty commonly is not having enough forage for the bees, or not having a water source nearby for the bees. So the bees go and like check out your neighbor's swimming pool next door because they love that chlorine, or they're all over their rose bushes or whatever else they have planted because they're looking for food. So that's one of the biggest ones. So make good friends with your neighbors if you're planning to start beekeeping. And if you are beekeeping in close proximity to others, make sure they're okay with it. Sometimes all it takes is bringing, a jar of honey to them every year. Sometimes that's all it takes. Other times it's, helping them to want to sting you, because if a honeybee stings you, it dies. And so what stung you probably wasn't a honeybee. It was probably a wasp. So helping them take care of that. And then Alex, in regards to preventative measures for varroa mites, there's not really a preventative measure because kind of the saying is if you have honeybees, you have varroa mites in your hive. It's just a matter of whether they're at a level that's measurable or not. Best thing you can do for bees.
Yeah, like the commercial beekeepers, what they do is like in the spring, they'll do a preventative oxalic acid treatment. So I mean, that's the only real preventative, but again, it's like Kelly said, there's going to be varroa mites irregardless. You know, it's just the you know, keeping the level under control is the important thing about that. So
Yeah. Also too, we have those sessions that you talked about, also the Facebook. There's also a list. I think you had given resources like the book that for beekeeping that you thought everyone should have or whatever that they should read. What would that be?
definitely, there's two of them that we always recommend. That would be Beekeeping for Dummies. That was one of the first books that I read when I first started beekeeping and is extremely helpful. And then Backyard Beekeeping, Kim Floatham. He is so extremely knowledgeable, you know, on that. And Kim recently passed. When was it that Kim passed away? I think what, about a year or
I think it
so
was
ago?
it was about a year ago. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was esophageal cancer that he passed from. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, but he was a very knowledgeable, very really kind man. So those are two that we highly recommend. There's a lot of other ones out there too that are, you know, just are interesting, like Bee Democracy, if you want to kind of learn about the culture of the bees in the hive, which is like extremely interesting. Um, or you can maybe Google Randy Oliver. He gets like into the very scientific aspects of, you know, of the beehive in that, if you're like really into the science of beekeeping. So it's a really interesting, he's a really great resource too. And of course, anything with Marla Spivak. So I just recently went onto YouTube, and there's like about 4 or 5 different YouTube videos that she has out there. And I saw the most recent one, and I highly recommend that one with Marla, because it doesn't just have Marla in there. It also has like people that are resources at the UMM too, and they also talk about like different plants that are good plants to plant in your yard and stuff like that. So I really watched that video. It's a very informative video. So those are some really great resources there. Do you have any others, Kelly? Or
I think I was saying that the ones that you had sent were really top notch. Another one that I like now that I've been beekeeping for a while is the Beekeeper's Bible. It's about as long as a Bible. It's pretty lengthy, but it has a lot of in-depth information about what you need to be doing throughout the year and why you need to be doing it, as well as different methods and management styles and when those might be more effective. So it gives a little bit of the reason behind the different versions of beekeeping that you might get answers or get questions about. So that's pretty useful. And then there's a lot of podcasts. I'm a big fan of the Beekeeping Today podcast. I listen to that every week. It is Jeff Ott and Becky Masterman now hosting it. Kim used to host it before he passed. But Becky Masterman I think she's retired from the U of M now, or she may still be working there, but she is, she's very involved as well. And so she can, they both do a lot talking about beekeeping, and she'll bring in the Minnesota perspective while Jeff is talking about what it's like on the Pacific Northwest coast. So that's super helpful. And then Beekeeping Obscura is another great one that Jim too puts on.
What about
one
this?
thing I forgot to mention. Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I forgot to mention too is the UMM Bee Lab. If you go there, they do also have online courses So it's similar to like what my husband and I had taken. And they also do have a free manual. So you can like download the manual and print it off, or you can also order it from them. I think it's like $30 or something like that. And it helps support the bee lab. And it's like, it's an amazing manual. It's meant for our area, talks about overwintering and everything, all the different resources and things like that. So I would highly recommend downloading that as well.
Absolutely.
What can we do this fall for our natural bees? Like with our lawns and things?
Let the leaf litter lay. That's the easiest thing I can tell you for the native species. So many of them overwinter in the down brush and bracken left over in the garden. So I need to put my garden to bed, but largely what that means is I'm gonna cut the stalks down and I'm gonna literally lay them flat in the garden so that any insects that need to overwinter can do that still in that garden. And then wait until May before you actually start pulling things out. Wait until our last frost date so that they can emerge from hibernation and go about their business and start their life cycle over again. So that's probably the best thing you can do for them.
Okay, that's terrific. Also with today, we're going to tell everyone that this is recorded. Maddie will be editing it for later. You can listen to it a million times. Please share it with friends. Please share it with others. These ladies, can you give us some last parting wisdom or things so we don't give up on the bees, please?
Kelly? Gosh, I would just say, it doesn't matter what you do. Just think about doing things for the bees, whether it's becoming a beekeeper or if it's just planting plants to support the bees. You know, either way is very important thing to do.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that you do, if you're a birder rather than a beekeeper or something like that, the things that are good for the birds are also good for the bees typically. So bird baths, put a couple of little pebbles in there, the bees will come down and get a drink. So yeah, make sure that you're tending to little wild patches in your yard if you have one, or I lovingly tell a friend of mine that she is an eco-terrorist in the best sense, because she'll seed bomb little patches of dirt with native seeds. So I don't necessarily recommend doing that, but if you see an area that has a blank patch of dirt and you know who owns that land, ask them if you can put some native seed there, because even that little tiny patch may be enough to support our local bee species and the honeybees that may be in the area.
Excellent. And if we can't live without them, if they die, we die, the bees in general. So
Yep.
thank you so much. Just terrific. So happy to have you. The comments are very bright about thanking you. So kudos to both of you. And Burke, if you want to pop in for any last things, off we go.
Really, it was so enriching. I've learned so much. And most importantly, I didn't realize that seeds that were not native might be, coated in a nicotinoid. And that's very troubling. I did not know that. Anyway, we are so grateful for both of your time and expertise and sharing your knowledge.